The reason why I recommend it, I'm actually kind of writing a little bit of a document for this. Um, I'm mostly like referencing another article, but it like automates a lot of the process, a lot of the what am I thinking of here? The more effective learning techniques. So like for example, the two big ones are space practice and retrieval practice. So for anyone who doesn't have to be familiar with those two things, like I have it right here in the document, space practice is just when you study, right? So it refers to like how you go about spacing out the times which you study. So like for example, I have an example up here. So you have an upcoming physics exam in like 10 days, right? So the question is like, what do? Do you study 1 hour each of those days, or do you study 10 hours the night before, right? Well, if you were actually do that test, like if you were actually to do that, and I'm sure many of people have, what you would find is actually the performance on the test the next day would probably be about the same, right? But if you look at that same test, like let's say for example, you get like a retest on that, like 2 weeks later, the person who has studied 1 hour each day during those 10 days is going to remember much more of that material over a longer period of time than the person who crammed the night before. So so what the research really indicates there in terms of spacing is that when you distribute your practice, when you distribute your studying, your practice and things like that, that you're more likely to remember it in the long term. It increases like the strength of that retrieval. And then you got like the second part, which is like retrieval practice, the how you study, right? Generally, when people study, like they tend to use like inefficient techniques. One of the most inefficient techniques that people tend to do, well, two of them really, are like listening to lectures, right? And then rereading notes, right? Like highlighting, rereading things and like going over and just rereading like in a passive way. That doesn't seem to produce very much results. If you actually want like better results for retaining the information and having very strong memories, what you need to do is actually recall the information without assistance. So if you were like the same situation, right? You're reviewing notes or whatever, you happen to be rereading chapters from the book. One of the best things you could do for yourself is basically just cover that section right there. Try to recall it from memory. Whether you fail or not doesn't matter. But try to recall it from memory. And then basically once you reach like a stopping point where you can't really remember anymore and you've really tried, you kind of like look at it again. You look, you see how much you got, and you kind of like, go from there, right? But just the very process of doing that, like the very process of trying to retrieve it from memory, even if you fail at retrieving it fully from memory, is going to strengthen it, is going to strengthen those bonds. And when you're tested later on that material, you're much more likely to remember it, and you'll remember it for longer periods of time. So those two techniques, Anki really does well. It takes care of the spacing for you, and the flashcard format makes you automatically put things in retrieval practice. And retrieval kind of like a situation, a question answer format, right? And it takes care of those two things right there for you.